I'm going to go ahead and get started. The way I want this to work is that absolutely people can come and go if they want to. I'm just going to kind of keep going unless somebody asks me to pause, in which case absolutely we will. I'm expecting that if people want to interject at any point, they'll go ahead and feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of keep talking about stuff. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about not just sharing your stories of what you did with each other, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about my process in like setting up this campaign and behind the scenes things that you guys never knew about. And we'll have some time for you guys to ask general questions and get the answers to things that were kept secret or ambiguous through the course of things. So in the 1970s, this group is playing D&D, and the Dungeon Master says you kick down the door and there is a vampire in the next room. Roll initiative. And the party fights the vampire. And while they are doing this, one of the players, Tracy Hickman, is thinking to himself, what? Isn't this a fabled creature of myth who is all about secrecy and mystery and using their power and their station to accomplish things behind the scenes? Why are we just fighting this guy in a room? He imagined an adventure that would use a vampire to a greater potential. If the name Tracy Hickman is familiar to you, it might be from this series of novels, which he co-wrote. If you're familiar with D&D novelizations, you might be familiar with the Dragonlance novels. He and his wife, years before these books started coming out, got together. This is them pretty recently. This is Tracy and Laura Hickman. And together they wrote a module called Ravenloft. This came out in 1982, and it has the bones of everything we had in Curse of Strahd, but in a way more basic way. This is the map for this module. This was a pretty standard setup for older D&D adventures. Even we have played some things that are pretty close to this format, where you go to a town. At the town, you learn about a dungeon. You make preparations for the dungeon, and you go and do it. And it's not particularly long. The original Ravenloft module is only made to go for 2 or 3 levels. It's certainly not like a long-form campaign like we did. Oh, thank you. If this map doesn't necessarily look super familiar, let me fill in some things. These are the labels that kind of come with this original map, so we can recognize a very specific section of the Curse of Strahd map that we end up with.
That kind of explains why the castle is just right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it explains why there's this random gate up here that they kept in Curse of Strahd, even though in Curse of Strahd it just leads into the rest of Barovia, and it doesn't really seem like you would just put another gate right in the middle there. After this, I will be sending you guys the PDF for the original Ravenloft module. I highly recommend just reading through it for the vibes. This is from a different era where this was like Conan's swords and sorcery kind of style. There's some extremely grim black and white art in there that's very cool. It is much more dungeon focused. I haven't really read through the whole thing myself, but I definitely thought it was super neat flipping through it and seeing what all in there is recognizable from our campaign and what was different. To kind of put it in the historical context, so 1982, this module comes out. It's not until 2016 that Curse of Strahd is released for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So the main writing credit on this book is Christopher Perkins, who is the creative director for Dungeons & Dragons at the time. So most of the stuff that wasn't in the original module is attributed to him. And actually, right about when we started playing this campaign, they came out with a kind of a revamped version of it. This is what's most available in bookstores now. I've seen this in Barnes & Noble. And apparently the biggest content update they made is they pulled the Vistani farther away from their racial stereotype of the Romani kind of roots. Like we even saw in the map for Ravenloft that they referred to them just as gypsies, which is something that they've been trying to. And even in 2016, people had complaints about how the Vistani were depicted in Curse of Strahd, so they tried to make some updates to that. So part of this, imagining, we have this original thing that's written in 1982, but then in 2016 it gets an update. So there is a wonderful foreword in Curse of Strahd from Tracy Hickman, the original author, where he says, I was approached to collaborate on reworking this story for current time, and vampires are treated very differently in the media of 2016 than they were in 1982. And Tracy Hickman really does not like what he has been seeing because over the past decade in particular, depictions of vampires look a lot like this, or like this, or like this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or maybe even this guy. Tracy Hickman says, the whole idea that you would have this monster, this male monster in particular, who is fueled by passion and manipulation, that he would be redeemable just if somebody would love him hard enough, is absolutely antithetical to the core classic idea of a vampire. He's really not enjoyed the direction this media has been going. So he wants to refocus on that and double down on it in Curse of Strahd. And this was an interesting thing just to come into this book and read it, because Strahd is a manipulator, and he is somebody who tries to present this image of himself as having this tragic backstory to suck you into this gravity well of his personality. I knew I was going to be running 2 campaigns, and I thought, you know, one thing that might work for me to try to help differentiate them a little bit, I don't want to put my thumb too hard on the scale, is what if in one campaign I did a little bit of work to try to make Strahd seem a little more sympathetic and a little more like maybe he was somebody that you could talk to and work with. And what if in the other campaign he was a little more classically antagonistic?
Which was
So that was one idea.
We tried to talk to him, it did not go
Well, I
well.
will say, if ours was a sympathetic one, then I am sorry for ruining any opportunity.
If ours was a sympathetic one, I'm so no.
Other
We
things.
didn't have the group to make him.
To be
No,
clear,
we
to be
harassed
clear,
the hell out of
to be
him.
clear, I was intending to play the character the exact same way. He would not be a better person in one campaign or the other, but it would be like, especially early on, I would do more work for one campaign than the other to make it seem like maybe he could be, and to create this question of, oh, is this somebody we can trust and work with? The answer would still be no at the end, but
I think-
would that add more
I felt we didn't
dimension
have
to
the
it?
sympathetic one. He barely showed up
Yeah.
until the middle of the game.
But we did feel sympathetic.
We're gonna find out.
We tried.
Guys,
There were some.
It's all right.
we
It
don't.
was-
Yes.
Other things that I had in my mind going into this and preparing it is, I'd heard bits and pieces of people's Ravenloft stories over the years. This is one of the most famous pieces of D&D content that is out there. In particular, Matt Mercer from Critical Role shared some stories about a Ravenloft campaign that he was a part of, and there were particular parts of that that I took to heart in preparing for this. I also watched Christopher Perkins, the writer of Curse of Strahd, run the entire campaign for a group of YouTubers. This is the show Dice Camera Action. I would still recommend going and watching it. It goes way beyond Curse of Strahd. Their campaign continues into other pieces of D&D content that came out later and kind of loses some direction. But if you watch the core Curse of Strahd stuff, they go from being absolute, people who are not chosen for knowing anything about D&D, but instead for having a YouTube following and just kind of generally being quirky personalities. You get to see them suffer in the most atrocious ways as Christopher Perkins delights in torturing them, and they eventually focus up and make something of it. It's really cool to see. And I'm not a huge horror buff, but there are some kind of classic horror pieces that Curse of Strahd reminded me of, and there were certain things that from it I related to others. So this is The Ring in particular was, I think, the thing that I most was thinking about for a particular reason while reading Curse of Strahd, aside from other vampire stuff that I've seen a lot of. I'll talk a little bit more later on about why that was something I had in mind. I did want to have, going into it, other things to differentiate these 2 campaigns. One of them is baked into the book for me. You guys drew cards at the beginning of each of these campaigns. This is a set-in mechanism that is guaranteed going to randomize parts of your experience to make it so that you are doing different things from the other group. You have different locations that you have to go to accomplish what you want to do. I've heard some people conjecture that it was because early on, because this is in the original module, this is in Ravenloft 1982. Early on, people didn't have that much D&D content, so they would kind of replay the same stuff over and over again. And maybe you would want to do Ravenloft again, but not have the exact same experience. So Tracy Hickman writes into it, you have to go to different parts of the castle to find different stuff. It's just going to be slightly moved around. Tactics are going to be different, and it would let you replay it if you just really wanted to grind through that again. So, but it also just kind of guarantees people's experiences will be different from one another. Another thing is, I was kind of thinking early on that because we have all these different locations, and this is a table they have for me in the book of like what levels you should be when you're at different places, and some of you may be looking at certain areas and going, oh no.
Yeah, that explains things.
I was originally thinking like maybe I could direct this such that like one group would just go to half of these and the other group would just go to half, and they would actually not encounter each other's content at all. I didn't end up doing that, but it creates a system where there are whole areas on here that you're probably also looking at and going, oh, what is that?
Yep.
I never went there.
I'm looking at one in particular.
There is more content in here than a group needs to do to hit level 10. And I felt pretty confident at a certain point that without having to do anything myself to tilt the scales, we would end up having some stuff with one party and not with another. So we're going to talk a lot about things that y'all did the same, but I'm going to kind of tease some differences in experiences. So be thinking about your experience with your group and whether you know the answers to certain questions, such as what was going on inside this windmill? Did we ever go into this windmill? For some people the answer is yes. For some people the answer is no. Other people
do you guys
might,
not let the Raven tell you not to do it?
other people
Just do an insight check on the Raven and realize that the Raven really thinks you shouldn't go in there.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, I was like, we definitely
We
went.
just trusted the Ravens for a really long time.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever.
We weren't sure, but we were creeped out when.
Oh, we specifically
No.
told the Ravens certain things.
Importantly,
Yeah.
importantly, Alpha did roll the insight check, and nobody succeeded the easy insight check to know what the
we should
Raven
tell you a lot about our
was trying to tell. This is 5th edition, and you have to roll dice.
That's true.
Another question might be, who the heck are these people?
Oh, yeah.
Some of you
Who the
may
heck are
know,
those people?
and some of you may not know.
Wow.
Friends!
Yeah.
Wow.
Some of you may know what the heck was going on Lake Zerevich.
Aw, dang it.
There was a guy in a boat who dropped a wriggling sack into the water.
Oh, you monsters! Oh, you're bad people.
Maybe they had other things on their mind at the time. It just happened to be passing by, and it didn't really seem like a big deal at the time.
I'm
but
a-
What the
Disgusted.
we'll talk about that. Maybe some of you will go, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
Are you fucking serious?
Splinter.
Maybe some of you ended the campaign with different people as the burgomaster of Valaki.
Oh, you monsters!
Yeah. Yeah, that,
busy.
What the fuck?
she's a bad person. We saw a guy in a lake.
She just never did anything
Is
to
that
warrant.
Lady Voctor?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, neither did the guy in the lake. We just saw a guy on a boat and we kept going.
We had other things to do.
You might
We
be
were
curious-
saving our friends.
Look at our best guy. He did the best.
You might be curious about the other group not knowing the answers to what may seem like fundamental questions, such as, who is this guy? Or
What?
who is this guy?
Huh. What is that?
Or
My God.
or where is this?
What the fuck is that?
Or
Oh my God.
have we ever heard the word Argynvostholt?
No, I saw that word and I said that's fake.
You guys never made it
Yes, this is
hard
why you don't know what the Silver Paladin drink is
Yeah.
referencing.
No, not at all. But you guys don't know what the meat pies are referencing.
And other
I did
things,
find that during my baking.
other differences may be even more critical and fundamental still. On the count of 3, when I show this next slide, I'm going to have just Alpha all together say the name of this character. Everybody feeling ready? All right, 3, 2, 1.
Oh,
Wait a minute, Sparky. When we first met this character in Prime, and I said his name was Milivaj, what did you say?
It's Millivoy.
Oh, and I said, oh, and you said, yeah, that's how that would be pronounced.
Yeah.
So, in one campaign, this character is Milivaj, and in one campaign, this character has been Milivaj.
Okay, but specifically in our it's I can't do it the way Duncan does it.
We'll get him to call in later.
Let's talk some things that none of you could have really known about the other game's experience, which is the content that you brought to the table. We're going to talk about your player characters. We're going to do some introductions so that these stories have some grounding as we move forward. Throughout this PowerPoint, to ground us a little bit, slide to slide, I will be using an alpha wolf symbol to represent when this slide is talking about the alpha experience, and an Optimus Prime symbol for when we are discussing
Nice.
the Prime campaign. So let's do the Prime characters first.
But we had a wolf character. It's fine.
Dr. Flint is a fire genasi. Tell me.
Ooh, that's some good
Yeah.
fucking art, my
That was
dude.
really cool.
Ah, yes, Dr. Flint and his trusty
That's
battle.
who Hellbender is.
Yes, his biosynthetic weapon, Hellbender, number 27 or so. We went through a few iterations over the course of the
I think we
campaign.
start with 22.
Yeah,
we
that's
have
right.
officially in the notes that you're like, yes, this is Hellbender 22.
Yeah.
A salamander robot that crackles with energy,
Yeah.
running through him at all times. We have a note from our recap about Dr. Flint that he had, I think the quote was, basically no backstory, which brings us to Cinder Sly, a blood hunter. This is a custom class invented by Matt Mercer from Critical Role. Can you tell us a little bit, Taylor, about
Oh,
Cinder?
before we go any further, could we just get classes?
Ah, yes.
Blood hunter.
Well, I didn't know what he did.
Oh, I
he
thought
was,
you said it.
Yes.
She's a long-tooth shifter, blood hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Human, right?
No, shifter.
Shifter.
Oh, that's its own
Yeah.
race? I never knew that.
What
Yeah.
was yours?
I
Yeah,
thought it
that's-
was all just your class stuff.
Nope.
Yeah.
Those are base.
And she really
Fire
likes
Genasi,
shifters.
Battlesmith Artificer.
Aw.
So he used his intelligence to hit people with a glaive really hard.
Yeah, and had a robot move up for him.
Yes, and
As a game
I
element.
flavored all of my magic as like so like he has like ancestry of like the living flame, so
Yeah.
he would imbue his robot with like his fire magic, and he would use his fire magic to cast all the spells.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, I just bit things.
Yeah.
Smashed
In this
things.
voice.
And my little shawl there would inexplicably move.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We also had a note for Cinder that I believe the quote was basically no backstory.
Yeah.
I believe that these characters were finished during the first session.
I
is
remember.
my memory. Yeah, as we were really at the
Reprehensible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everything ready.
if you're wondering, it was a problem.
Oh boy.
So I'll go ahead and call this out because Duncan isn't here. We discovered during our recap that Duncan's character had a very complicated backstory related deeply to the lore of Eberron that never came up in the entire campaign, and therefore he never shared it with anybody. Speaking of a character that had a secret backstory deeply tied into the lore of Eberron, who never told anybody, never came up the entire campaign, Derek played Tox. Can you tell us a little bit about Tox?
Yeah, so Tox is a changeling sorcerer whose backstory is that he was a member of the Is It Guild from Ravnica.
There are many
Love
voices.
voices.
There are many voices, that's true.
And as a member of the Is It Guild, used their changeling powers to be a crash test dummy for all the various projects that they undergo in Ravnica. Is It is the sort of infrastructure guild of Ravnica, but they achieve their goals mostly by making bombs. And so Crash Test Dummy was not a great fit for Tox, who wanted to, live. So left Ravnica to join with this wandering adventure party. It gave me a great excuse to go through a bunch of different voices throughout the campaign, because Tox had different aspects for different
So you're like a good
moods.
changeling.
As a changeling, Tox could transform into all kinds of different creatures, which was why he made a good crash test dummy, because they wanted to know how this crash would affect a dragonborn, how it would affect an elf. Maybe there'd be differences in there. So Derek would try to keep up in describing like which guys, because he had like 2 or 3 that he would flip between consistently. Like one that was a dragonborn, which is the one that's depicted in the commissioned art that we have up in the game room. You had sort of a smooth talking elf.
Yeah, so
guys.
the two that came up most often were the smooth talking elf guy for whenever it seemed like charisma was going to be called for, and the dragonborn whenever fighting was going to happen.
Yeah, I was never given a token art for either of those, so we mostly just went with this true form token of what he looks like when he's not transformed. I've been reminded that before I continue, I was given this gift today, which Julia and Kayla have been collaborating on secretly.
I mean,
It's mostly been,
It's
been Julia working on this for a very long time
I'm
now.
just
Well before we reached the point in the campain again where we knew that Gandalf Blinsky was a particularly
I was just
important
about
So
to
she
say
told
that.
me about this, and this is what it inspired a little bit,
that's
the
right.
drawing that I made. And then I asked her if it would be okay if I gave this to you for your birthday while she was still working on this. So we did kind of collaborate. But oh my god.
That's awesome.
Also, have the non-Prime people seen the artwork that we had? Okay, good.
I think so. I'm trying to share with everybody.
Accent.
Accent.
The whole time, the whole thing.
It's not taking for some reason. Why won't it take?
Right, wrong or something.
What's happening?
I'm sure there'll be an opportunity.
I'm sure. Tox is not the only character in Prime who can change his appearance. We have an Eladrin, Shava Imavon.
Oh, you found all the pictures.
I just went through Roll20 and I found all of them because Ashley saved none
And
of
she's
them.
gorgeous in every
So
iteration.
I had to
Pretty
get
much.
them. Different appearances for every season of the year that, depending on her mood, she transitions into at the beginning of day, and each of them gives her a special power, if I recall. Could you tell us a little bit more about Shava?
So Shava is an Eladrin
What is that?
warlock. It's a elf from the Feywild, and specifically they have a seasonal appearance that is sometimes tied to preference, sometimes tied to mood. Shava's is very tied to her mood, and she is a wanderer because she randomly fell to the Prime Material plane at some point. Not really sure how she got there, and
Whoopsie.
discovered that somehow, in some way she didn't quite understand, had made a pact with Baba Yaga. It was kind of a bit of a weird problem, but did give her all the fun warlock
The
abilities.
expression that Jack is making is the expression that I made when Ashley told me this. For the
Yep.
first
How
time.
about that?
Actually, because I had this backstory all set up, and as things went on, I was like, this is very much in Shava's
This
wheelhouse.
feels like it's for me.
Yeah.
With the food.
And so each season is sort of winter is like cold and desolate and upset.
So you were winter
So
mode
you were that
most
all
of the
the
game.
No, I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
summer. I was just summer most of the time because summer, we were fighting a lot of the time, and so she was angry. And often summer would let me when I misty stepped wherever I landed. There'd be a like a flash fire right there for a few points of damage.
What?
Yeah.
What?
So I ended up with a build that pretty much had me teleporting everywhere.
time.
Yeah,
I had
Eladrin, we
so
determined
many.
they have the ability to a few times a day Misty Step as a bonus action, and it does not. The wording is very clear. It does not count as a spell, so you can't cast a spell the same round that you do it.
That's
I by the end I had
That sounds like a pretty good
4 Misty
race.
Steps, a Dimension Door as a spell,
I mean, why
Misty
wouldn't you be
Step.
transporting, teleporting everywhere?
Misty Step as a spell from something else, and a feature where if I got hit, I would turn invisible Misty. I could turn invisible Misty Step,
And she would frequently use several of these in the same turn.
in the same fight, I'd just be
It's
gone.
strong.
Yeah.
You're very mobile. I think from looking back through the maps, it looks like you were summer most often, and then autumn, and then winter, and then spring, like just on the very first map, I think.
Oh.
And never again.
Her smile and optimism gone.
Something like that. So let's talk about Alpha a little bit. Alpha, George and Jack came roaring out of the gate saying our characters are going to know each other, they're going to have a relationship, they're going to be buddy cops.
Oh, also,
We're gonna have-
Fox and Shava did know each other.
Yeah, that's true. They had that established background, but these two were coming
A
in
little bit.
as partners, as professional partners, and they established that immediately.
forgot about
So I couldn't.
Oh my gosh, I love George's art.
It's
not.
It's not.
It's
And this is
not.
really weird.
Oh, no.
Roll20 deleted George's art.
The most when he got mad
He
at
is
George
his.
left us.
There's no more profile picture on his character sheet. His token is missing from every map he was ever on.
Wow.
George did not save a copy of his art on his computer anywhere. I could not find it. This is the closest I kind of remember
Oh my
him
gosh.
looking like, and I think does capture the essence of his
Oh,
character.
yeah, 100%.
A wood
Look at
elf
that
monk
face.
who had kind of a jaunty, playful thing, very handsome, very young. But I to this day, I've never had that happen with Roll20. I don't know what happened to that.
I wonder if they
image.
got like a DMCA notice, but everyone has just random
Yeah.
challenges and
Yeah,
stuff.
I use.
Maybe
so many
Roll20
images on that.
snooped on our conversation and learned that he left the campaign.
I-
so they
Roll 20 was like, what a betrayal.
Yeah, I discovered it was missing at a very auspicious time in the campaign, which I think we'll get to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But these two are lined up. So Action Jack is a character that Jack has played many times in other games we've done. So this was kind
Yeah,
of
this
a
is like-
new
Is it your
iteration
third
of this
time?
Yeah, this is
character.
3.3.0.
Yeah.
Did he
Uh,
start over at a certain level?
Huh?
Does he start over at a certain level?
It's just whatever level that campaign is. Yeah, it's not the same guy. It's a different. It's
okay.
this
The multiverse
started the game.
So he's Link.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Human warlock, raven. It's the hex. I really don't like the way that they talk about the hexblade because it's like, yeah, the hexblade is like, that's your patron. I'm like the what part of it is the patron? And it's like, so a lot of times, and they did it in Did Vax ever do? Well, he was a warlock. No, he was a paladin.
never a warlock.
No, that's right, he was a paladin. But yeah, Raven Queen, anti-undead stuff, and then a few sessions in, I wrote a backstory, a huge backstory.
Yeah.
If it was occurring to you of the R list, there were no anti-undead anywhere. There was there was a teensy tiny bit. We had a little bit of radiant damage, but we were so.
When I say I was anti-undead, I had no abilities until like level 5 that could do anything.
There's
Yeah.
disposition.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he just
because-
disapproved very,
very strong.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, an extreme hard line. As a senior cop to George's rookie cop character, Action Jack is the mentor. A very hard line approach to almost every situation, which in many occasions was exactly what the party needed to keep them on track, to keep them focused. Sometimes meant that if there was a mission that clearly had to be followed, that maybe something else off to the side was just a distraction, and we had to steamroll past it to keep going. So we saw the double-edged sword of that. Could you really quickly sum up your backstory?
Yeah, backstory was he grew up on a human farm because in 5th edition, liches have to fuel themselves with souls.
So not a farm for humans, but a farm of humans.
Yes, a farm of humans. He's watched all of his friends and family be taken off to just have their souls sucked out for the lich to fuel his undeath. And then Action Jack was actually halfway through the process of having his soul sucked out when a party of adventurers, including a certain person, interrupted the process and destroyed the lich, but Action Jack was left in a state of half-death, whereupon the Raven Queen offered him the ability to be like, hey, you could die now if you wanted to, or you could stay on the material plane. You'll kind of be dead, but like you'll mostly be alive, and you'll just do your work for me. You'll just take out the intelligent undead where you can.
And it left him with a very distinctive physical feature.
Yeah, the supernatural alopecia. Yeah.
Yes. And behind his
which you can see in his
his
you can see in his art he has no hair anywhere, and he got the Devil's Sight invocation, which means
it's a good invocation.
It's a good invocation. It allows me to wear sunglasses even at night. But it resulted in his lack of actual eyeballs, and he had just empty sockets with like burning kind of like coals deep inside that he hid with the sunglasses most of the time.
So between Action Jack being a warlock and Shava being a warlock in either campaign, whenever the group would go somewhere, and I would say, it's dark, there would be a chorus of, I have dark vision, and then one voice saying, I have 120 feet of dark vision, I can see through supernatural darkness. There was no escape from it in either game. Yep. There was no way out. So seeing that Action and Daniel, as Jack and George's characters, had partnered up to be partners in law enforcement, Duncan and Julia put their heads together and said, you know what, our characters should have a relationship too. And since they went in this super legalistic direction, let us both be rival mad scientists, which is how we meet Lucian Throgmorton,
most beautiful.
who is a high elf, if I remember correctly.
He's a high elf. He's from a rich background. I made this icon myself with
Beautiful,
a sprite editor.
He
And
looks
for-
kind of just like an elf that's high.
For a long time, he had human-shaped ears, but then everyone, including me, kept forgetting that he's an elf, so I added those ears. So you can tell that he's an elf. And Lucian is his specialty is candy. He wants to make candy and sugary drinks that give people powers.
It's kind of like a Willy
He's an
Wonka
evil,
without
insane,
the infrastructure.
Well, Willy Wonka is evil. He's Willy Wonka without currently having a lot of money, and he comes from a rich family, but they cut him off, and he and Peregrine are rival mad scientists, and they sometimes fight each other, but they also write nasty academic articles about each other and their research.
The way we begin the campaign is that Action and Daniel show up to arrest two people who are fighting in public, causing destruction of property and violation of the peace. Lucian's counterpart in this rivalry and this hubbub is Peregrine, the artificer,
Helper!
who is so I'm gonna have to speak on his behalf for his class, which I honestly don't remember that well. I think this is also a battlesmith?
No, artillerist.
Is it just
artillerist? It's
And
also
you just only ever
yes,
use
an
one
artificer,
number.
artillerist.
So whereas Dr. Flynn is walking around with a combat-capable robot that hits you, Peregrine here has a much smaller robot that plays the tambourine, but does so in such a funky way that it creates temporary hit points every round for everybody within 10 feet of it. 1d8 plus your intelligence modifier, which it turns out is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So they call it artillerist because instead it could have a little flamethrower that does like 2d6 damage to one guy. So Duncan did that one time and almost died and never did it again, and instead fucked me every fight. Kayla never found the arts for this character that she first appeared as to give to me for this presentation, so we're just going with the true form art. But at the beginning of this campaign, we don't see this character in her true form. We see an old lady who says that her name is Gladys. And as Action, Jack, and Daniel are arresting the two mad scientists for destruction of property, this old woman wanders by.
She tries to sell them drugs.
She said that she likes some drugs, and she has a packet in her backpack, in her small backpack, I think, a packet that says drugs on it. It's like masking tape and written on in Sharpie. So they arrest her immediately as well. So we don't know too much about this old woman,
Thank you,
Gladys,
Sparky.
at this point, except that she's just kind of walking around and just kind of being trouble. But could you, for the sake of what we find out later about this character, could you go ahead and tell us?
It takes longer than I remember. Like when we were doing the recap, I realized it took much longer than I realized for her to reveal herself. Sorry, did I kill you?
I don't remember that couch. No, because that couch used to be against the wall.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. One time Burton jumped onto this couch while I was on it and tipped both of us
Oh.
over.
There was fried rice everywhere.
Terrible. Anyway, so
You okay?
Nyx for a while is masquerading as this old lady Gladys because she realized old people can get away with much more than who she truly was, which was a 12-year-old girl. So this is Nyx. She runs away from home because at home her parents are really high-ranking, well-known nobles who no one knows are changelings, and she is locked away in her house at all times, not allowed to change her form at all, and forced to stay in the same form at all times, not interact with anybody, and not do any magic because it would draw attention. So she's a wizard, and so she runs away from home and does not want to go back because she hates them. And
She stopped by a hot topic before she
ends up falling in line with all these people who she really wants to be friends with because she thinks they're really cool, and ends up falling into freaking Barovia and everything else that goes on. She is a necromancer, which I thought was just the stupidest choice for this campaign.
Yeah, that's why it was so good.
Yeah.
I was like if we didn't have a necromancer or like a death cleric over the course of both of the campaigns, I would have been really sad.
Well, see,
The fact that we had two changelings.
Yeah.
You'd think there would have been a single cleric or paladin.
Yeah,
It's divine
it's too on the nose. It's too easy.
A single dedicated healer between the two parties.
Nyx was very interested in the necromancy art,
Did you
but
feel dedicated to it?
specifically she was never allowed to have friends, so she made her own friends using animals, dead animals, and she'd bring all of them to
Well,
life.
you must have made a friend at some point.
Well,
We're going to talk about Nyx's friends. She made a good deal of friends over the course of this campaign.
but yeah, her name is Nyx, and she's just here to have a good time.
Yeah.
We got several sessions deep before we realized that the alchemist Lucian was like one of the most powerful potential healers in D&D.
I'm just not in the habit of healing. So I was like throwing daggers badly. I was like doing all kinds of stuff badly, but it turns out, yeah. And then I started throwing candy because I'm really Wonka. So I would throw candy, and then I would look up a candy name generator of like a chaotic candy flavor and tell them it's like barbecue mango. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Love that.
Also, Nix's voice would keep cutting out.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So high.
Kayla's characters have a tendency to speak so high that Discord cannot hear them. That's a running problem, unfortunately.
Also, so it just would not work at all.
So this campaign, of course, begins. We're going to talk about how the Alpha campaign begins, with 3 of the party members being arrested by the other 2, who begin to conduct them off toward prison. On the way, they walk down a lonely road in the forest, and as they go, a man rides towards them on horseback out of the mist. A man who looks like this.
Very trustworthy.
And he says to them, I have a letter asking for help from the burgomaster of the nearby town of Barovia Village. And he gives them a letter which kind of spells out like, help, please come to our community. Please save us from the troubles that we are facing. And as quickly and mysteriously as he came, this stranger rides off into the mists again. If this scene is unfamiliar to those of you in Prime, it's because Curse of Strahd has a number of different adventure hooks that you can begin with. Not all parties need begin from the same place. This
We did find
adventure
that
hook is a plea for help. There's a very basic one called Creeping Fog that's basically like, you're all out in the world and a fog comes, and when it clears away, you're in Barovia.
Yeah.
That's for if you don't have any faith in your party to do anything in particular, and you want to kick them in there as fast as you possibly can. There are a number of others, some of which did not get seen in this campaign, but I did experiment with the third Curse of Strahd group that I ran during the course of the last 4 years. But the one that Prime experiences is Mysterious Strangers. In Mysterious Strangers, you are an already established group of adventurers who are hired by a local noble to chase away these troublemaking Vistani who come through this area every so often, and they set up camp and they play their loud music and they have their fires, and they're foreigners, and people just generally don't trust them and like them. Please politely run them out of town. We don't want them here. Going to meet them, Prime is invited to sit at their fire. A storyteller called Stanimir summons visions in the fire and tells them a story of a general long ago, wounded on the battlefield, staggering off into the wilderness, found by the Vistani and nursed back to health. That general always valued the Vistani for the good deed that they gave him. So later, when he founded his own kingdom in the valley of Barovia, he told them that they could come and go at their leisure and do as they pleased. That prince has now fallen under control of a terrible curse, and the Vistani seek the virtuous, the willing, the heroic to free him from his cursed fate. Would they be willing to travel with the Vistani to the land of Barovia and see what they could do to save this prince from his fate?
Well, that sounds sympathetic.
So yeah, we walked right in there.
Yeah,
Prime is the sympathetic.
I would have had
And
a
Alpha is never given anything approaching this in terms of a case for Strahd being somebody that anybody cares about.
And we wouldn't have cared.
Well, that also makes the Vistani way more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Is that true? Do they actually want that?
There are several different groups of Vistani that you might meet over the course of this game. Some of them work for Strahd and are evil. Stanimir is good, and he actually wants this. He does know that every group he has ever brought to Barovia to accomplish this mission has died horribly. But it is his people and his tribe's quest to keep trying at this, because as long as the Curse of Strahd goes on, Strahd's suffering, maybe they care about that, but Barovia is suffering, and he hopes that somehow Barovia can be liberated, and he has lost all hope that it could ever happen from within. He is also, he is not headlining this effort. There is someone else within the Vistani who is coordinating this, and he has absolute trust in her we'll talk about that a little later
To be
on.
clear, we had just extremely positive relationships with the Vistani the entire time.
Like we could tell one or two people
They,
were not positive.
they
but-
said that they worked for Strahd.
So did we. Okay.
Yeah, but I know you guys to be liars and criminals.